stop, listen, and ask yourself, have you ever pondered at the idea that there may be something to the other side? If so, and you're hearing my voice for the first time, then you may have just fallen into the void. Hey, hello there, and welcome to a very special two-part episode of Into the Void, where we talk about anything and everything paranormal. I'm your ghost host with the most, G-Man, and before I get this episode underway, I would like to take a moment to thank you, the listener, for tuning into this podcast. Also, a very big thank you so much to our last guest, YouTuber Kelsey Davis, and her friends Ashley Marie. You could find her on YouTube, Ventures with Ashley, and their BFG, who I like to call the big friendly giant, Tyler. Remember how tall that guy's? A tall man.
That was a tall dude.
Once again, though, thank you so much for all three of them for coming onto the show. If you haven't had a chance, check out Kelsey's channel. She has a lot of spooky and fun videos posted. For more on that, go back and listen to episode 13. Ooh, scary. Also, if you want to stay more connected with this show, you can do so by becoming a member of our Patreon. That's right, become a member of our family and receive a custom-made Into the Void sticker, along with a shout-out on the next episode and some pretty awesome tiers. You can find us at patreon.com/Into the Void Pod. That's patreon.com/Into the Void Pod. Your support will help this show grow by allowing us to do episodes not just from this amazing studio here at Undercity Comics in Whittier, but perhaps a haunted location, or to be able to do a live podcast, quite possibly from another haunt convention. The sky's the limit, but we can't meet those expectations without your support. So do me a favor and check out the Patreon, look it over, and if you want, support it. If not this podcast, maybe another. Hashtag support your local podcast. And with that said, let's get into this episode. This episode is dedicated to two of the world's most well-known paranormal investigators. I'm talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren. So, without further ado, please help me in welcoming two gentlemen who need no introduction, but I wanted to give them one anyways. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome a man who looks as though he's up to something when he's doing nothing. Mr. Rene, I think Pennywise is my father. Bravo.
God, I love this. That was a good one.
Thank you.
Hi, Rene.
Hi.
How you doing, Rene?
I'm doing pretty good. Pretty excited for this episode. I want to hear what you guys found, and I'm kind of also excited to share what I found.
I am very curious to hear what you have found. Yeah. This is going to be interesting. Yeah. Anything new by chance going on with you, Rene?
No, nothing in the particular. Same old working, and trying to spend time with my lady as well too, as much as I can.
Okay, good. Well, last but certainly not least, please welcome back to the studio a man who works hard and plays even harder. Bats and ghouls, please give a warm hand to Mr. Gabriel, they call me the Doctor, Samaniego.
Hey, guys.
Gabriel, how have you been?
Been doing all right, keeping busy.
Nice, all right. And as you know, the Halloween season is upon us.
Yes.
So have you started getting ready for Halloween?
I bought candy.
You bought candy.
Yeah, and I've kept it. I haven't touched it. I actually forgot that I bought it.
Hey, good for you.
I was just thinking today, I was like, I can get some. I bought candy. I don't need to buy candy.
Do you have any ideas like what you're going to do for Halloween this year?
Not yet. Haven't planned that far ahead.
Okay, all right. No, it's fine. Any idea about a costume?
I had to first find out what I'm going to do before I decide on costume.
Okay, no, that's fine. So you still dress up though for Halloween and all that?
I haven't in the past couple of years, but I've been looking this year to do something fun, go out and party.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, I just want to say I have a couple things new for myself. We just recently got 2 new dogs at my house. Ooh. I'm very excited about that. One is she's a black Labrador, and I have a little Chihuahua.
Aww,
yeah, okay. Bella and Buddy. Yeah, they're both rescues from the pound. They are sweethearts beyond all doubt.
Okay.
But Bella did try to escape through the window when I was outside.
Is Bella the Chihuahua?
Bella is actually the black lab, and Buddy is the Chihuahua. Yeah,
I
crazy.
thought the same thing too. I thought, yeah.
I know. Whenever I tell people, they're like, okay. So, listener, this episode is going to run a little bit different. See, we each chose a section to look at, research, and discuss. So Rene will be talking about the Amityville case. Gabriel will be talking about the cases that inspired the Conjuring films. And I will be talking about everyone's favorite doll, Annabelle. Now, gentlemen, let me ask you before we officially get into these cases here, would you say that a lot of people are unaware of who Ed and Lorraine were and why they were so popular?
Yeah, actually, I realized in doing the research that a lot of people, when the Conjuring movies came out, Amityville came out, they thought that these were just inspirations, or rather stories that were came up with for movies.
Right.
They didn't know that they were based on true events and true tales, and that Ed and Lorraine were actually real people.
Yeah.
And these were and the actors playing them were actually playing the real characters, or actual people.
And they're all actually connected to all of our cases.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the thing. So I think that's what makes it really interesting as well too, is that they were like essentially the go-to paranormal investigators during
Yeah,
that time.
they were definitely the people that the church would call. Especially when the case sounded, when they got something a little that sounded absurd.
Yeah.
But it sounded justifiable. They would call Ed and Lorraine to come in and take a look and see what their thought. Yeah, that's really interesting. But yeah, like you were saying, Gabriel, there are cases that were shown in the movies that people had seen in theaters and all, and then coming to find out that they are real people doing real investigations. That blew my mind, actually, because I had heard of Ed Warren. I had never heard of Lorraine Warren. And then I saw the films and I was like, okay, Ed is obviously married. But to know that these cases were real completely changed my perspective on these films.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say it was for the better, but actually it changed my perspective because then it made me want to go and dig into the actual cases. So, for those who are tuning in for the first time on this show and or have no idea who we're talking about, pay close attention. For the first 50 years, Ed and Lorraine Warren were known to be America's experts in the subject of spirits and demonology. With movies like The Conjuring, Annabelle, The Nun, and The Haunting in Connecticut, the public has gotten kind of an idea of the kind of work that Ed and Lorraine Warren did when it came to the paranormal investigations. But I'm not sure if people really know the history of the Warrens or who they were before they, started to become well known, along with what really happened during those investigations. Now get this, guys. With more than over 10,000 investigated cases during their career, 10,000, that's a lot. I mean, if they had a Facebook page, wow.
Yeah.
Could you imagine the number of followers they would have on a Facebook page?
Yeah.
So like I said, the kind of work that Ed and Lorraine did with their paranormal investigations, with one of the cases in particular that Lorraine herself swore she would never go back to. But how does one investigate a haunted house where the residents still live there without sounding crazy? What do you think, guys?
Just wait till they're gone.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, yeah, you could wait till they're gone, or you could approach them like as they're leaving the house or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Be respectful and stuff.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, again, you want to come off in a way that doesn't sound like, hey, you have a ghost in your house. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
don't
you want
freak
to.
them out.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't cause a panic.
Well, in order to understand that, we need to look at the Warrens' history. So let's get to know the Warrens a little, shall we?
let's.
Ed Warren Miney, born September 7th, 1926 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. His father was a police officer, and his mother, nothing was really mentioned about her, actually, just that her name was Pauline. Very interesting. He joined the Navy at 17 years of age, and he is a self-proclaimed demonologist. Now, Ed had always had some sort of connection with the paranormal, and it would seem this was due to the fact that Ed grew up and lived in a haunted house. So here now is a quote from the website warren.net in which Ed says, "My family would go to sleep just around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Many times I would hear the closet door beginning to open. At first, I looked into the closet and see shapeless darkness. Then, slowly, I'd start to see a light beginning to form, and it would morph into a ball-like shape." So Ed goes on to say that what he saw was known, I don't know if you guys ever heard this term before, globule.
Yes.
You have? Okay, perfect. That's awesome. So the old powerful Google, describes it as a small dark cloud of gas and dust seen against a brighter background, such as a luminous nebula. Very fascinating. And Wikipedia describes it as dark clouds of dense cosmic dust. So this is what Ed would see at night. And to make matters more interesting, the globule would begin to form with a face of an old woman, and she was not pleasant looking. Now, I know for a fact that a globule pretty much is an orb. Right. It's pretty much just an orb. Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of pictures actually of people capturing orbs, and then if you zoom in on the orb, you can actually see a face that forms inside these orbs. So it's not a surprise, actually, or he would see a face of a not pleasant spirit. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, how she passed away. You know what I mean? So we got Lorraine Warren. Now, Lorraine Rita Moran, born January 31st, 1927 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, also is a self-acknowledged clairvoyant and light trance medium. Now, listener, what is a clairvoyant, you ask? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. A clairvoyant is a person who claims to have supernatural ability to perceive events in the future or beyond normal sensory contact. Mm-hmm. Now, imagine, if you will, having the ability to see images of the future. Now, imagine having to keep this information to yourself. So that's exactly what Lorraine had to do. See, she did this in fear of being rejected by her mother and father. But I guess you could say the beans were spilled one day in school when Lorraine and her classmates were outside planting a tree for Arbor Day, and Lorraine was able to see the tree in all its glory, even though they had just planted the tree. Now imagine being with your class and you're outside planting a tree or planting something, and as the seed or the tree is being planted down in the ground, you're seeing it go down, but then when you look up, you're seeing the tree in all its glory already as it is. Mm-hmm. Now, when Lorraine was asked what she was looking at by one of the nuns, she didn't even hesitate to tell them. She flat out told them she was looking up into the tree. And this was the moment that the nun had asked her if Lorraine could see into the future. And no joke, Lorraine's answer is, I guess I can. Not even like a questionable type of, I don't really know, or I'm not sure what's going on. She just accepted it right away. That's just, to me, that's amazing. Because there are a lot of people out there who have clairvoyancy or can see things for what they truly are, and they don't ever want to tell people because it's a scary thing, you know?
For themselves, for others, people don't understand, don't accept things that they don't understand.
Exactly, yeah. In 1970, Lorraine Warren was tested over at UCLA, where her clairvoyancy was tested and judged as far above average. Now, to me, that is pretty wild to be able to take a test to see where your clairvoyancy is at, and then to be told that you are above average everybody else. That's insane. So now we have Ed and we have Lorraine. Now let's put them together and talk about the Warrens. Because this is like just beyond anything that I could ever imagine, just learning about them and studying them and the cases that they did. And to learn about Lorraine separately and Ed separately is one thing, but to put them together, well, there's your tag team right there. So Ed and Lorraine were married both at the age of 18 while Ed was still in the Navy. And this is something that I actually forgot to mention earlier, but when Ed was in the Navy, his ship actually went down. I don't think it was attacked. I think there was a problem on the ship and it went down into the sea. I don't believe very many people were hurt or killed. And then Ed actually, when he got married, he was actually on leave. It's called survivor's leave. And he was basically on leave, and that's when they ended up getting married. Oh, okay. Their only child, Judy, was 6 months old when he came back from the war. Okay. And then when the war was over, Ed and Lorraine had to find a way to make means for themselves. So it turns out that Ed and Lorraine both had skills for landscaping art. Ed even attended art school in New Haven, Connecticut. All they needed now was a subject. And I take it the subject would be
spirits.
Hey, there we go. Hey, all right.
I wanted to get this.
I was thinking, how do you draw transparent?
Right? So it's very fascinating that you brought that up, actually, because Ed would find a local haunted house, be it through the newspaper or word of mouth, and they would take their car and drive to the location. Now, Ed would draw the landscape of the house or the location and it would catch the neighbor's attention, who then would like call the house that they're in front of, letting them know like, hey, there are some weird people standing across the street in front of your house, but across the other side of the street, and they're drawing your house right now. So Lorraine would then talk to the current residents of the home, offering them the painting in exchange for information on the haunting that was happening in the home. That is got to be the smartest way to find out about paranormal activity in someone's home, by drawing their home. And I even read that Ed would draw the house, and he would draw the spirits around the house. Like he would draw little ghosts or like some sort of apparition around the house. And then Lorraine would come and bring up the painting and, get the information that they needed. So again, that's a very smart way to do it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that.
That's pretty interesting.
Because nowadays, paranormal investigators, you have World Wide Web and you have social media, so you can get all types of information.
And a lot of people are DIY, especially with spirit finding and such.
Yes, yeah, exactly. A lot of people are DIY, that's for sure.
We just do this ourselves.
Exactly. So one thing to remember here is that even though Lorraine would go with Ed on these haunted locations, she would remain skeptical. This was due to outlandish information or overactive imagination, basically making things up to get the attention. Now, this was her thought process because, again, there are a lot of questions when someone says, I have a haunted house, or my house has a ghost in it, or something is possessed. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of red flags first before you even put those flags away. So it doesn't surprise me that Lorraine would be skeptical of what was being told to her. In a recent book I read titled The Demonologist, The Extraordinary Career of Ed and Lorraine Warren, written by Gerald Brittle, Lorraine recalls the feeling she had when she and Ed started looking into these strange phenomena. And I quote, "In the beginning," Lorraine remembers, "I was more than a bit weary of people with whom we spoke. I thought they were kind of suffering from overactive imaginations or were just making things up to get attention. In fact, some of these things people told us sounded completely outlandish back then." So that's actually not a surprise right there. So as time went on, Lorraine became convinced that what was happening, these strange phenomena, was indeed conclusive. This was due to the fact that after visiting other states with other witnesses, the stories started to have similarities. The Warrens started to learn that inhuman spirits occurred in stages. The activity starts off mild, not to really cause alarm. However, there are times individuals become singled out or attacked, and there is usually a reason why they would be targeted. Before I move on here, Rene, I want to get your thoughts just kind of on the little history that we just gave away about Ed and Lorraine Warren here. Rene, what do you think? You've got two people here who get married, have a child, and then just get into the paranormal.
That's the thing, is like, I find this couple very interesting because there wasn't anything really leading up to them doing this. It's just something that they chose to do. And obviously they chose the right path because they became infamous. They took on cases that no other either investigator or even people would even try to go near espespecially during that time in the 70s.
In the 70s.
There's a lot of skeptics. People were just not so much ignorant, but more they would want to just ignore what was going on because they didn't want to be that group of people on the street.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's the thing. It's really, really cool in a way that they decided to go against the grain, essentially, in society and just pick something that just they felt right doing it, and they've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. That the passion, I think, slowly started coming in for them. For Ed, because he grew up in a haunted house and a lot of things would happen to him, I read that in the book that his motivation was he wanted to see if other people are having the exact same or similar experiences that he had growing up. And I think then he wanted to just study it and understand it more. But as far as a passion goes, I have to say, I don't think it was a passion for them. I think this is just something that Ed already had an interest in, and Lorraine, being the wife and being loyal, she said, "Yeah, let's do this." But with her clairvoyancy that she has, and it's one of those like fate steps in. Yeah, you got some
question that
exactly. Yeah, that's a good question though. Whether they had a passion for this or if this was just something that they had to do, almost like it was like a
calling.
A calling. There we go. So I want to turn my attention now to Rene, who did research on the case of the home in Long Island, New York. Is that correct? Long Island, New York?
Yeah.
Where a lot of unimaginable paranormal activity took place. Renee?
Yes. So I took on the Amityville house in New York. Ooh. So I chose this one because essentially this was the one that I knew about the most, or at least knew infamously or famously from like the movies and stuff. And I did know before then it was based on true events, but I didn't know it was actually connected to all of our cases as well too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like that's how we're all connected in some way. So when I did some research, I actually found out that the family before the I'm gonna mispronounce some names. So bear
it's
with
okay.
me.
Yeah,
it's the original family that left the house. They were
the Lutz family.
The Lutz family.
Yeah, the Lutz family.
The Lutz family. So I found out the family before the Lutz family, which was the
DeFeos? DeFeos, yeah. The DeFeo family.
Yeah, which this is basically essentially the spark that lit the hauntings in a way. This is what brought it on or something.
Okay.
Like that. Was that the DeFeos moved into this house they had a big family, which consist of Ronald, Louise were the mother and father, and their 4 children, or their 5 children, sorry. 5 children was Dawn, Alice, Mark, and John Matthew, and their eldest son being Ronnie, aka Butch.
That's a big family.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they all moved into this house, which was like, they had like 5 bedrooms, I think, in this house.
That was it's a pretty big house.
It's a huge house.
Yeah.
And if you see pictures, listener, if you see pictures of this house, it's really huge. It's like 2 stories, like I said, with all the 5 bedrooms and stuff like that. I'm assuming it has multiple bathrooms as well.
We'll definitely put some pictures up on the Twitter page and Instagram page for sure. But yeah, it's a pretty big house.
So the DeFeos, basically this family would always cater to the eldest son, Ronnie, because he was, at the time, I think he was like 20 something, maybe 30, 20, and he was basically like the spoiled brat in the bunch, because whenever he didn't get his way, they gave him money because he would basically be very nasty to everyone and stuff, and that he didn't get what he wanted and stuff.
Oh, he would like lash out at the family.
Yeah, he lash
geez.
out. So sometimes that also includes to mental health issues as well too. That
sounds like my youngest.
Except it doesn't end up like this for you.
Yeah, no, he doesn't have like let me just knock on wood. He doesn't have a mental disability, but he does lash out.
Does lash out? Yeah.
3-year-old. So he.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So basically on the night, I think it was, I had to do like research to find out what was going on. So in November 13th, 1974, in the night of that night, basically Ronnie DeFeo runs into the town in a nearby bar screaming bloody murder, saying that his family's been murdered, that everyone's dead and that he needs help, and the whole time he's saying that it was like a mafia hit or something like that.
What?
He's claiming, oh yeah, like my family, and so then when the town people they saw basically everyone in the house was sleeping in their rooms and they were all shot to death.
Oh, man.
The husband and wife were dead. All 4 children. And these were little kids too, mind you. They were less than maybe like 15 years old, all of them.
Yeah.
And they were just sleeping in their beds and they all just died. They were all just shot to death. So the police investigations that night came in, and the police took in Ronnie for questioning to see what was the story and stuff. But then once they were interrogating him, at one point he did come out and say that it was him that shot him, because they did find a rifle that was to his name, and it was loaded and it was used that night. And he did claim that he doesn't remember, but then yet he was possessed to do it. He was claiming that he was possessed.
All right, so let me just real quick here. I know you got more on this,
Yeah.
So let me just get this right. Ronnie DeFeo,
Yes,
goes down to the town in a bar.
Yes,
and he tells people that his family's been murdered.
Yeah, he's already like in a hysteria too, mind you.
Okay,
he's weeping and he's like shocked of what happened in his house, that he ran into town at a local bar.
And he tells people that the mafia had managed to find him and kill his family.
Yeah.
But then when he gets arrested, he confesses that it was him.
Yeah. Because the police were pressing on him. They were like, I guess the evidence didn't fit that. That's the thing.
So
There
like the
was
interrogation was just starting to come down on him to where
they were seeing there was no forced entry. No one broke inside the house.
Okay.
Everything was intact. Nothing was stolen, essentially. It was just basically someone was inside the house and decided just to shoot everyone.
Jesus. That's insane.
So that's what happened that night. And that will play later on, I think, into the Lutz family. Because everyone, apparently, so they did a time frame of when the family was shot, which was 3:15 a.m.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. So that will play into later. So fast forward, I think, maybe a couple of years at least. I think 1977. Maybe a couple of years, or maybe it was less than that.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 3 years after the DeFeo family was murdered. I think then that's when the Lutz family moved in.
And they didn't really mind of what happened in the house. The George, the husband, the stepfather, was like, well, people don't really. I mean, houses don't kill people. People kill people.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the line. Now, mind you, I'm using everything that was off of the book, the Amityville Horror.
Okay.
So that is the closest thing to at least a reference to what happened in the house. Claiming that everyone was saying that none of this really happened. I don't know. I kind of believe it in a way, especially the stuff that happened to the Lutz family as well.
Right.
Too.
Yeah.
It's all very logical in a way.
Yeah.
Especially what happened in the house with the DeFeo family. Such a violent act as well too.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what happened was that the stepfather would basically wake up at 3:15 a.m. every single night.
Jeez.
That he wouldn't go back to sleep. He would basically stay up after that. And when he goes back to sleep, again, the next night, 3:15 a.m., the same time that the DeFeo family died.
That's insane.
Later on, they would claim that they smelled like strange odors throughout the house.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Strange odor. And then also a green slime ooze would be on the walls and keyholes. That could be ectoplasm.
I was just going to say, that right there is a very...
strong indicator.
Strong indication of ectoplasm. In fact, real quick here, you can't even think right now. I'm so sorry. So, listener, you obviously know about Ghost Adventures.
Yeah.
Zach Bagans' Ghost Adventures. And there is a house. I'm not really sure what state it is, but it's like the Devil's House.
Yeah.
And there is a video of Zach Bagan and the crew in that house filming. They're downstairs in the basement. They come back upstairs, and on the blinds of the house is this strange, clear, like ooze that's just randomly forming. It's not condensation.
It's not like
it's not water.
Yeah,
it's like a weird ooze, which another indication that there is ectoplasm in the house, which again, everybody back in the 80s would think ectoplasm from the Ghostbusters movie was a made up thing, but in reality
it's a
real thing. Okay, Renee, go ahead. I apologize.
No, it's okay. No, that's great. And then also, obviously, the most infamous one is they experience cold spots throughout the house as well, too, at certain places. Now, I don't know, they didn't say where it would be, but I'm only assuming that would probably be inside the rooms where the family members did die.
One I know for a fact is the sewing room.
Yes.
The sewing room definitely was a major spot.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's which no one lived in that room, right? When the Lutz was there? Or
yeah,
that was a room that they didn't choose to live in.
She made that room, the wife, George's wife, made that room into like a sewing room, like to, men's stuff, put stuff together. So
yeah, because they didn't want to be in a room, because they felt the room felt weird to be in. That's the thing. So basically throughout, the Lutz family did think that, there is something here. So they did get a priest to come in and bless the house to see if, that would help with all the strange occurrences and stuff like that. But it seemed like it didn't help, because when the priest did come, he heard by himself, when no one was around inside the house as well too, that he did hear a voice that did yell, "Get out," and it basically really shook him that he left. Essentially, he didn't tell the family at first. He didn't tell them to, he heard something say, "Get out." He essentially told the wife, like, "Listen, you need to leave that house. You can't be in there anymore." But, they didn't listen to him. Essentially, they thought maybe, it just didn't work.
Right. Yeah.
Until later on, after the Letts family left, he did say that he did hear a voice that says, "Get out." Other occurrences was that the most notable paranormal activity was that the daughter did have an imaginary friend named what was it? Dawn? Was it Dawn? I think it was Dawn.
It sounds like, I believe the imaginary friend was Dawn.
Which
I want to say.
Which was also the name of the daughter
that
died in the DeFeo family.
Yeah.
But they did say that Dawn was like would take up a different kind of like entity in a way, that it would be like a pig-like creature with like red eyes. But the father and the mother did see out in their window in the dark one night glowing red eyes staring at them and stuff. So that was another weird thing. And then then they said too that also George would become very like irritable almost in a way, that very almost not violent, but he would be what is it, like that state of mind where like when you're up all night and then you're really tired and people are asking questions and you just become like, irritable basically. He would lash out at the family and stuff like that. Even the mother too, that's the thing. But even the kids were acting strange as well too. They weren't listening. They weren't because they said originally the kids were very well behaved. They played very nice, but for some reason the kids would get into arguments, everyone would yell at each other, and then just one night they just decided just to grab their stuff and leave. Nothing major happened. It was just basically the combination of everything happening, that it wasn't going to get any better, and they decided just to leave the house, not even grab any sort of kind of like
personal belongings.
They left everything there.
So, out of curiosity, within the research that you did, was there any mention of like a physical attack or some sort of like mental attack or like even like a dream state attack?
There was only thing that what I found from my research was that George was basically just more and more aggressive each and every day.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Okay.
To the point where it's like the mother or the family came to agreement that it was the house.
Okay.
They didn't really think it was, because that's the thing, is that they didn't initially thought it was a paranormal thing. They just thought, it's just strange occurrences and stuff like that.
Coincidences, basically.
And it was just like brush it off in a way. But that it just kept happening so close in between that they realized it wasn't going to get any better.
Oh my God. Jeez.
So they just moved. They moved, and then obviously everyone knew about their story. They moved into, I think it was like an in-laws house. And then they said that, whatever they left did follow them essentially in a way.
Man, yeah.
Yeah, so that, that really kind of was like really weird to me, that unfortunately that they didn't essentially leave their problems behind.
Right, it still followed.
Yeah, even though they went as far away as they can, still strange occurrences happened, but I think it was like the tetherness of the house. It was like almost like an echo kind of in a way, that the further they got, the less occurrences happened more and more. And when the years went on, I think they just happened less and less.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's insane, dude.
Yeah, that's what I was really interested. I was mostly interested in the family before then too.
Right.
Because it was really interesting to see that, okay, that happened before they moved in. And all the stuff that happened, especially the 3:15 a.m.
Right, yeah.
That's what really caught my eye, was that they died at 3:15 a.m., but then George would wake up
consistently
at 3:15.
waking up at exactly 3:15.
Yeah, it was always on the dot.
Yeah.
This might actually scare you guys, but the past 3 days I've been waking up at 3:15.
Get out.
I was thinking it was much later, and I decided to check my phone, and I was like, okay. So I woke up about 3-4 minutes ago, and it's 3:19. So.
Oh man, it's already starting, guys.
Yeah,
we do the research and now it's starting.
Well, that's the thing. I was doing the research, and then it was literally this last night. I didn't wake up, but I kind of did, but I did find it hard to go back to sleep, and I felt something was always looking at me when I was kind of laying down.
Yeah,
so that was the weirdest thing that happened.
It was me.
Gabe was like,
and Gabriel in the corner just.
Go back to sleep.
Like Hey Arnold's Helga Stalker.
Yeah, so that is my take on the Amityville house.
Yeah.
I hope that was cool or enough information for you guys.
No, that was perfect. Renee, thank you so much for sharing
No problem.
the Amityville case. We're going to come back at the end of everything here because I have a couple things that you mentioned that I wanted to actually bring up.
Go for it.
That Ed had talked about in his book towards this case. So
okay.
we will definitely talk about it at the end. I'd like to now move on to something that I've been very interested to know about interested to know more about. Gabriel, you took on the research of the two cases that inspired the Conjuring films, and I'm looking at you right now, and you have that look in your face like, crap, it's my turn. So before we get into that, before we go into what you found, I wanted to ask you, Gabriel, what was the most challenging part about this research?
I would say the most challenging part was because I was trying to stay away from researching the movie and focus on the actual families that inspired this. So I've mentioned before to you before this, I've only seen The Conjuring. I haven't seen The Conjuring 2 nor Annabelle. I have seen the two of the versions of Amityville Horror.
Okay.
But in any case, I didn't want to go back and watch them and then become tainted or have my information tainted by the movie in Hollywood.
For me too,
Yeah, that was really hard for me to try and stay away from the movie because, like you said, you don't want to be tainted from something like that.
Yeah, so I try to stick to what I could research independently regarding the families, of course.
Okay.
So it wasn't too challenging, but of course, I wanted to go back and watch the movies just to be a little bit more on it. But in any case, it's information that inspires these tales in these movies. So.
Okay. Well, take it away, Gabriel.
All right, so The Conjuring actually came out in 2013, The Conjuring 2 2016, directed by James Wan. Actor Patrick Wilson, who played Ed Warren, and Vera Farmiga, who played Lorraine Warren, were portraying the Warrens in these films.
In case, listener, you have no idea who that is, go see Aquaman. He plays Ocean Master in the Aquaman film. I just want to point that out because some people don't really know. You have to give the simple reference. Yeah. I'm sorry, Gabriel. Go ahead. You're going off over here.
So, since we're talking about acting beforehand, before I get into my research, turns out that Patrick Wilson, he did actually mention that during the second movie when they were filming, he started noticing some strange goings-ons.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Curtains were moving violently. He would hear children laughing or child laughter in his home, which is just kind of odd.
That is.
So, as I mentioned before, sometimes just knowledge of the paranormal or specific things cause you to, I guess, become magnetic to these occurrences. So, and a little bit more open to the idea that they're happening, and you're more aware. So, listener, be careful. I'm telling you this story. You may start to notice some strange things goings on. So, getting into the stories.
That was creepy. All right, go ahead.
Getting into the history here. So, in 1971, the Perrin family moved into their farm house in Harrisville, Rhode Island. This family was Carolyn and Roger Perrin and their 5 daughters, who were the oldest, Andrea, then Nancy, Christine, Cindy or Cynthia, and April. They noticed some strange things going on in the house. Nothing really major at first. As everything happens, it always kind of just starts to roll into more noticeable things. So at first you would maybe notice something was not where you left it, or just missing altogether. Maybe you can easily pass this off. I thought I left that comb here. I must have put it somewhere else and just forgot. I misplaced my keys. Where could they be?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like misplacing your keys at home, and you're like, wait, I could have sworn I just had them there. Yeah.
Maybe I put them in my pocket in my jacket. So
they're minor things.
They're all dismissible.
Okay.
Then Carolyn would start noticing and hearing like scratches and noises coming from rooms that nobody was ever in. Like the scratching on the kettle in the kitchen, and no one's in the kitchen. Then she would notice that after she'd clean and sweep and mop and everything, there would be small piles of dirt on the floor, which is odd. They're little neat piles on the floor.
Yeah.
Which just thinking about it, as a ghost, you're just messing around with them, and I want to swear just because it sounds a little more, it's like, I'm just gonna leave this dirt right here after she cleaned.
Right.
My mom would be pissed off. Like, who left this dirt here?
I just cleaned this.
It's like, well, at least they put it in one spot. I can
right.
clean that up.
Thank you for at least putting it in one spot.
That's probably something I would do. And then afterwards, the daughter started noticing things around the house, spirits, something in the corner of their eye. And then as they start becoming more frequent and realizing that these are spirits, that they noticed that most of them were harmless, just passing by, but there were very few. There were a couple that were, malicious and angry,
Really?
Yeah, just I guess you can say aggressive, verbally aggressive.
Oh, okay.
The worst one that we found was one that was known as Bathsheba.
Ooh.
Now, funny thing, Bathsheba, when they actually, even Carolyn, when these things started going on, she went in and did some research of her own to find out what's going on with my house. Come to find out, Bathsheba, there wasn't a Bathsheba that lived on the property in the 1800s. So, yeah, the mid 1800s, she was said to be a Satanist.
Oh, wow.
Or a witch. She was said to have been involved in a neighbor child's death, although she was never convicted. There was never a trial. But when she died at 73, she was buried in a nearby Baptist church. Now, the daughter, the eldest daughter, Andrea Perrin, in an interview, she said, whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house and resented the competition my mother posed for that position.
Whoa.
So she became very aggressive. And even if you want to relate this into the movie, she was the angry ghost that you would see. You would see a part where Patrick Wilson was standing and talking to Vera Farmiga. Ed and Warren were talking outside.
Right.
And there were feet hanging behind him.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So Bathsheba, or Bathsheba Sherman was her name. She actually was, she died there, or she died. And as I mentioned, they said that she might have been a witch.
Yeah.
Well, stories, and of course it's stories because we can't really go back and check if this is true. However, it said that when she died, the moment of her death, her body became like stone.
Oh.
So, witch?
Right? Witchy.
I'm sure she'll sink, right? Or will she float?
Oh. Sinker or floater. I love how we're making fun of this woman when all this really happened, by the way.
Right?
Yeah.
We're not cursed. All right.
But I guess you can, I guess on the opposite side, there was a benevolent spirit. A spirit that seemed to be kind of protective in a sense. And that spirit, he went by the name of Johnny Arnold. Now, Johnny Arnold, he seemed to be kind of protective, would try to, I guess you can say, like, protect the children from any other spirits that were harmful or malicious towards them. But if you happen to, meet eyes with him, it's almost he was skittish and he would disappear.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, Johnny Arnold, good spirit.
Yeah, I was going to say Johnny Arnold. That sounds like a good name for a spirit, too.
Yeah. So continuing on, the families started noticing the smell of like rotting flesh in the house. Then you notice even more things going on, poltergeists. The beds would rise off the floor. The father, Roger, oftentimes he'd have to go into the basement, although he always tried to avoid going into the basement because it was a dirt basement. It wasn't paved. He'd always feel like something was cold and stinking that was like with him. It was like the sensation, like who's with me, like someone's standing behind me. But he'd have to go into the basement whenever like the boiler or water heater or whatever would break, because he'd have to go, restart it so that the family would be warm in the night. So a lot of odd things are going on here. And it turns out in the research that Carolyn also looked up, she was able to find out a little bit more history in this home on the property. The property actually belonged to a family of there was 8 generations of this family who lived and died in odd ways. A lot of them. A lot of the children were drowned in the nearby creek.
Wow.
They were some of them were hung in the house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there was just it was always mysterious causes, like how did this happen? But there was.
And you said there was 8 generations.
8 generations of family members.
Wow.
And it's not just like a couple of family members here and there, but over the entire 8 generations, there's just been different odd deaths in the family around this house, this property.
Oh, man.
So it's easy to see why there's something going on in the Perron family house. Eventually, the Warrens became involved into the story. They definitely said that there is a presence here. They wanted to make, they started drawing attention to it. And on one visit, Lorraine, she performed a seance to attempt to try to contact the spirits that were possessing the family. And Carolyn, the mother, she, during this seance, became possessed and spoke in tongues.
Whoa.
Her chair rose from the ground and apparently flew across the room. Like she was thrown.
She was in the chair.
She was in the chair.
And got thrown like across the room with her in the chair.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Now, the movie actually shows that Ed performs an exorcism to free her of this the spirit of the possession. That actually didn't happen. Even Lorraine said that Ed knows that he cannot be he would not do this. This is not something he would do. That only a Catholic priest would be able to perform this exorcism.
Right.
So, but of course, Hollywood wanted to spice it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Give it some more action.
That's something we're going to notice with all these films, by the way, is that every Hollywood film about something that is based on true cases, in order to keep it going, you gotta amp it up. So, but honestly, just what you're telling me so far, it's more eerie to hear about the real life case than to actually see this movie. Which I'm not dissing the movie. I encourage you, listener, go watch these films. They are very entertaining. But if you really want to know the truth, Gabriel, go ahead.
So during the seance, later on, as she was older, Andrea, the eldest daughter, she actually secretly watched the seance. She peeked behind the door. Man. Nothing happened to her, but she was able to notice and see what was going on. And she said, "I thought I was going to pass out. My mother began to speak language not of this world in a voice not her own. Her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room." She witnessed this going on, and she later said the movie was much milder than what actually happened in that house. Hollywood wanted to make it more relatable to the common people. If you start throwing things that are just way too paranormal, it's going to be very hard for someone to believe, oh yeah, that's real, that can truly happen. There's a lot of there's room for doubt.
Okay. Yeah.
So eventually, after this seance, Roger, he felt that the Warrens were the reason why his wife was like this, that this had happened to her. So Roger kicked them out. He kind of blamed them for this happening, and his wife, she became, I guess you can say, unstable mentally. She was just never quite right. He blamed her for her mental stability at this point. And for the next 10 years, because the market, the retail market is so expensive for homes, they were never able to leave.
Oh man!
So for 10 years, they were kind of just stuck in this situation, trying to make best with what the circumstances were.
Right.
Eventually, they were finally able to move out, have enough money to be able to get out of this situation, and after that, the haunting ceased. It didn't follow them for great. So it didn't follow them.
Oh, that's a luck then, because for them to go through that for 10 years and then to move and not have anything follow them, I mean that's to me that feels like that's a lucky break for them. Yeah, unlike the Lutz family.
Yeah, I think Andrea had said that there was a lot of paranoia, of course, after that, but there was great relief. Lorraine, she eventually had come around to say that just certain families are prone to disturbances. Maybe it's just because this family, because of how they were a large family, they were kind of represented in of the old family. They were a large family. They were, there was a lot of history with the family, so maybe just that had like clinged on to them. And so, interesting to note, after this, the following owners of the home, the Perron family home, they moved in with all this stuff. They hadn't even finished like unpacking, from what I understand, and things were just way too out of control. They left everything that was already in the home and left the home.
What?
Like they had just moved in and they were gone.
So all their boxes, everything still in the home. Yeah. Jeez.
And
that tells you though just how high of an activity and how many spirits were in that actual home, to where a family moves in and they can't even finish unpacking everything.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So, I mean, it was just lingering, I imagine. But I guess on a good note, the current resident, the current owner, she actually never really noticed anything paranormal. That's her name is Norma Sutcliffe. You actually will see interviews if you go on YouTube. You can look her up.
Oh, nice.
She actually was mad about the movies.
Wow.
Because she hasn't experienced anything paranormal. And as Lorraine said, just certain families are more prone to these disturbances, right? So I think that she never had this experience because they were not drawn to her. Now, the only thing she's angry about are there's people, of course, breaking into her home, trespassing, trying to see if they can catch something in her home. And she's found people in her home, and how scary is that? You never really notice anything paranormal, but to find something that is real, a real person in your home because they want to see if this stuff is real.
That's a good reference right there, because our last guest, Kelsey Davis, that came on the show, she had actually said something on one of her videos that I have actually found to become very, very true when it comes to the paranormal, and that is ghosts don't scare people. People scare people.
Yeah.
And for this woman to be living in this home, to be owning this home, and knowing about everything that had happened, and nothing happens to her, but now she has to deal with, people breaking in and standing on the property and, taking pictures. And I'm guessing they have like tours that would walk by and talk about, what happened to this family. That just sucks for her. And I'm so sorry that she has to go through that.
Right. Yeah. Give her privacy.
Yeah, exactly.
And if anything, I don't think she wants to market it, but I'm sure she could.
Yeah, she could. I mean, she could definitely make a profit off that, but it sounds like she just wants to live her life.
Yeah, she's happy on the property, and let's not rile up the spirits and cause something else to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
So that's the parent family.
That's insane. That's absolutely insane.
So as I had mentioned, this all took place in Rhode Island, in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and this was during the 1970, I believe I had said. Yeah,
this was still in the 70s.
Yes, it's still in the 70s.
Okay.
So after this, the Warrens were gaining more popularity, or more notability, I should say, especially with the church. They were more involved with the church. They eventually were requested to I guess so much involvement in a case that was across the sea in the UK, United Kingdom. So it's about maybe 6 years after the parent family. In Enfield, England, in about August 1977, the Hodgson family, they started seeing and hearing strange things in their home. The daughter, Janet, about 11 years old at the time, she sat up one night in her bed and she noticed that her dresser moved across the room. It slid across the room. So it kind of like started almost abruptly. Like all of a sudden, these things started happening. The family would hear knocking coming from different places in the home. The mom, she actually thought that somebody was in her home. A burglar or like a drifter hiding in the walls or hiding in a room or somewhere they didn't know. So she called the police and they would not find anything. However, they did say that an officer reported that he saw a chair rise from the ground and fling itself across the room. Like it happened right in front of him.
Another chair. Yeah.
I'm thinking these ghosts are like trying to mimic wrestling matches.
Or they just don't like chairs,
Standing room only.
Yeah.
And even the Daily Mirror, the local paper that was in the area, they reported that they noticed some strange going on when they went in to kind of report as well on it. Things would be moving. They'd hear the knocking in different rooms. So they'd have these similar sightings. Also, Legos and marbles, like toys, would fly around the room and they would be hot to the touch, like too hot to pick up. So things are starting to happen. And they also hear dogs barking like from empty rooms. Hellhounds.
Right, yeah.
So
that's definitely a sound of a hellhound, that's for sure.
Yeah, lights flickering on and off. And I actually, in one case that I was hearing, there was lights. Oh no, that was I have to go back a little bit. So in the current Amityville home, I actually happened to jump back because I wanted to mention this because it has to do with flickering lights.
Oh, yeah.
Corey and Jennifer Heinzen, current owners of the new home. Corey, he actually was moving stuff in, and he noticed that lights were flickering in the home as well. And they moved into this home knowing what had happened.
Okay.
Of course, but they also wanted, he said he had noticed that lights were flickering, but there were no lights in that room.
I'm sorry. Wait, say that one more time. So lights were flickering in a room that had no lights.
Yeah.
What?
So he had to leave.
Okay.
I mean, he had to step out. So
I would step out and then start the car and take off.
Yeah.
That's insane.
So I digress. Lights were flickering on in this room. And this one I kind of think was interesting. Like, hey, they're paying rent. Coins would fall out of nowhere, like in the room. Like just coins would like fall out of the air,
and just on the floor.
Yeah,
and you would hear like that coin noise that it makes when it hits the floor.
Yeah, coins are just falling out. It's like, hey, at least they're paying me rent to stay here. You know,
right? I know. Hey, at least you got help. Thanks for the rent and all.
Yeah, furniture would start spinning on the floor, or they would just turn over without anybody touching it. Then, and I talked to you about this a while back. I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Absolutely.
Finally, the last straw, in one of the rooms there was an old iron fireplace, right? And it was ripped out of the wall and just flung across the room.
That is a lot of energy.
Yeah.
To be able to pull an iron fireplace.
Yeah, so it was after this finally that paranormal investigators all started showing up and wanted to get involved, claiming that they could help with the situation. But most of them decided that it's probably, all fabricated. That even one of the children said on a couple of times they made up things that were happening. Not really specific as to what exactly what was, because at that point they just kind of left it all as folly. But enter Ed and Lorraine Warren. They came in and said, no, this is not just a haunting. This is a demonic presence. So they speculated differently. They wanted to, and they went ahead and they were trying to prove this. But at this point, because there had been so much skepticism, the family, they thought that this was just being exaggerated. Even people thought, here come the Warrens, such big names. They're trying to make a name for themselves.
Yeah, so they're pretty well known at this point to where it makes it seem like, oh, okay, the Warrens are going to show up, which means that we're going to get, camera crew and publicity and all this stuff. And
yeah.
Okay.
So they thought, we're not going to try to put this out there. This family, they didn't want that publicity. They thought the Warrens are just taking this out of proportion. But Ed stood by it, saying that, no, this is a demonic presence and you need to get this taken care of. After 2 years of this happening, all the hauntings in this home, it just stopped. They all of a sudden just quit. As quickly as they started, they just stopped. And the family, again, they were skeptical that the Warrens really had anything to do with it. They had come in to do some investigation, and of course Lorraine tried to involve herself as well and contact the demon and spirits. But again, the family didn't want to deal with them at the time. So it was, even though the movie puts a lot of presence in it, from what I understand, there wasn't too much involvement because the family became very skeptical and just didn't want this taken out of proportion.
Right. Yeah. No, I can imagine. And that's another thing too, is those hauntings that happen. The families and everything. When you're doing an investigation, there are families out there that they'll ask you, can you keep this on the down low? Can you keep this hush hush? We don't want exposure like this to our family, especially our children who are already dealing with enough as it is, spiritual wise, and now they're going to have to deal with actual people. Yeah, that's something that I've never really been too fond of. Like you got your ghost stories, your ghost adventures, paranormal state, all these different types of shows that come out, and it makes you. To me, it's a form of entertainment, and we are entertained by it because we want to see what's going to happen. But at the same time, I feel bad for people don't really want to be exposed on television or, on social media of some sorts. So yeah, that's man. So Gabriel, you found a lot of really interesting research and facts that led up to these movies being made. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, there's also, so you guys know, there is a documentary with the Hodgson family that was done, and check it out.
Yeah, that's something we're gonna listen to. If you get a chance, go online, check out these stories, look at these pictures, and really just do yourself a favor and try to assess it yourself. Really figure out, is this, were these hauntings pretty genuine, or were they more publicity staged? I'm going to say they were genuine 100%. Ed and Lorraine Warren had done so many different cases and dealt with so many different entities and spirits and inhuman spirits that, it makes you wonder, how in the world did Ed and Lorraine Warren even continue to, live their daily life?
Yeah. And
that's something that I know I'd like to touch on real quick here before I get into this next case. And that is that the Warrens, they have a museum. There's a museum at the home of the Warrens. And this is where Ed and Lorraine kept all their memorabilia. I want to say memorabilia, but it's more, they're more like...
it's a vault.
Yeah, it's a vault that objects that are haunted objects, cursed objects, possessed objects that stay there, reside there. And if you ever get a chance, listener, to visit this museum, you are to never, ever touch anything in that museum, because there is a very high chance that you will come back with something.
Just watch Annabelle Coming Home.
Exactly. And speaking of Annabelle, let's get into this. Something that I don't really want to talk about, but we're definitely going to have to, because like I said, I researched Annabelle. The research that I did, not exactly too thrilled. Now, I will say this before I get into this research that I have found on everybody's favorite doll, Annabelle. I will say this. Doing this research, definitely weird occurrences were happening while doing this research. For those of you who follow me on Facebook, for those of you who are my close personal friends on Facebook, you know for a fact that on my Facebook, I was putting down comments about how creepy and how uncomfortable I was feeling. Yes, Rene saw, Gabriel saw. I was feeling very uneasy doing the research on the doll. And the reason being is because I personally, in case this is your first time listening to this podcast, I personally have had my own paranormal attacks. So if you want to hear more on that, go back to episode 2. Número 2. So imagine, if you will, receiving a doll that you had no idea would completely change your outlook on ghosts. Well, that's exactly what happened to 3 people in Connecticut. Ed and Lorraine received a phone call from I'm probably going to say this wrong. Episcopal. Is that right? Episcopal. An Episcopal priest who was relaying a message he had received from a clergyman from another state. The message was considered to be sketchy at first until the priest mentioned about an attack, a physical attack from the doll itself. Now, needless to say, Ed and Lorraine took the case and drove over an hour to meet with the people making the paranormal claim. When they arrived at the house, they were met at the door by Deirdre Bernard, a registered nurse, the first woman who had been experiencing strange occurrences with the doll. Now, next they met Laura Clifton, who is also a nurse, and boyfriend Cal Randall. Now, I could be wrong here, because I don't think it really specified whether he was the boyfriend or if he was just a friend, like another roommate living there. I'm going to say he was the roommate, not the boyfriend. So I'll retract what I said for the boyfriend part. Okay. So the 3 of them started to explain from the beginning about the doll and why her name was Annabelle. Deirdre began to explain that the doll was given to her on her birthday from her mother. It was meant to be like a novel decoration in the home.
Yeah, I remember your childhood.
Yeah, like something to just like put up, and it's there. My grandparents actually, they have a room that I believe was my mother's room when she was growing up. Mm-hmm. And in that room, they had a Raggedy Ann Is it Raggedy Ann and Andy or something like that? Or
I forgot. You're right. I forgot. I forgot.
But there was a boy and a girl. It was both Raggedy dolls. I mean, it was always eerie for me to go in my grandparents' house, and for anyone who's ever been in their grandparents' house, you kind of get like an eerie feeling in there because it's an old house, So to me, it was always eerie, but. So it was, Deirdre began to explain that the doll was given to her on her birthday from her mother. It was meant to be sort of a decoration for the home. It wasn't until a year later that the women began to notice that the doll had been moving on its own. See, it started off small. In fact, Deirdre began to explain that the day of her birthday, she had placed the doll on her bed in a certain position. When they came back home, they noticed the doll had changed positions. Now, Laura then chimes in and explains that things started to become stranger after they had seen the doll was changing positions in the home. And to make matters worse, Laura explains that the doll even moved rooms. One night, when Deirdre and Laura came home, Annabelle was sitting in a chair at the front door as if she was waiting for them to come home. Another chair. What's with the chairs, by the way? It's just fascinating that like these spirits or these inhuman spirits are using a lot of chairs, like a furniture to try and hurt people or to make it even more eerie. I mean, to come home and have a doll sitting in a chair in front of your door, that is just...
That's really weird.
Well, imagine what if it was like sitting on the fish tank? That'd be kind of just odd too. So.
No, you're right. That would be odd. Like you come home and the doll's sitting on top of the stove, like, hey, what's going on? What are you on the stove for? So you're right. It is odd to have a doll sit anywhere after you just place it somewhere else. So another incident that had happened, Annabelle started leaving notes on little pieces of parchment paper. Now, here's where it gets a little creepier, okay? One, they never owned any parchment paper in the house.
Okay, now that's weird.
Yeah,
that's weird.
they had no parchment paper in the house. They never owned any. They don't know where it came from. Number two is the writing was like in a red marker or pen or pencil, and they didn't own anything like red marker or pen or pencil in their home. So again, where was she getting this stuff from?
Was she going to the market?
Right? I mean, does she like...
Whose money was she using?
Seriously. It really makes you wonder, like, where did she randomly get this stuff? Now, here's something for you. The notes would say stuff like, help us, or help Cal. I remember Cal is the other roommate. But the worst of them all was when Annabelle was found in Deirdre's room. And now this is where I started freaking out, because as I was reading this, I just had this eerie feeling like somebody was in my house just watching me, go over the research. And I just kept getting this like weird, horrible feeling in my stomach. Like I wanted to throw up. And it wasn't like one of those like, oh, he hasn't eaten, he needs to eat. No, it was literally just like I had just had something and then I was feeling sick. And it wasn't like a heavy dinner. It wasn't like a huge piece of pizza or anything. It was soup, for crying out loud. And I felt sick. And I know for a fact that it wasn't expired either. So the worst of it was when they found the doll in Deirdre's room with blood on her hand and 3 blood dots on the doll. There was blood, human blood, on Annabelle's hands and 3 dots of blood on her chest. Now, there is an indication that if there are things that come in 3 from something that is inhuman, that is considered to be a mockery of the Holy Trinity.
Right.
So that there is a huge possibility that right away she already knows that, or she or it or whatever already knows that, they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
That pretty much convinced them that there was more to Annabelle than meets the eye, and they consulted a medium to find out more about the doll. They learned from the medium that the doll's name was Annabelle Higgins and that she had died on the property. So she had been trying to communicate with them by moving the doll around. She said that everyone was so busy with his or her life that she had no one else that she could relate to. So here's where the big red flag comes in, or at least one of the many red flags that come in. According to the medium, Annabelle just wanted to be loved. Then she asked if she could stay with the girls by living in the doll. And to make matters worse, the lady said yes.
like this is little kid just wants some company, you know?
Right?
So,
yeah. And you know what? I will say this. There are a lot of cases out there of paranormal cases where a child is involved, the spirit of a child. Look at the Roosevelt Hotel. Look at the Mitzvah Hotel. There is rumors of children running around, and there are witnesses that have seen children running around. So, and children's spirits seem to be drawn to the female presence because of the whole motherhood and all that. So to me, that doesn't surprise me that this doll, or Annabelle Higgins, and I air quote Annabelle Higgins here, wants to be with these women, wants to stay with them, and the fact that they said yes, there's another red flag. Now remember, they are nurses, and nurses, they care for people. They tend to people. So when they heard that it was a little child, a little girl named Annabelle Higgins, and they thought to themselves, well, she just wants to be loved. So they said yes. So Ed began to ask about the physical attack that happened to Cal Randall. In a dream, Cal woke up to see his own body lying on the couch. But in the dream, something was off. And as Cal looked down at his leg, oh, God, this is getting creepy. He could see Annabelle climbing up on him, wrapping her hand around his neck and choking the life out of him.
Nope.
Right? Oh, my gosh. So the worst, though, was when Cal and Laura were downstairs packing for a trip that Cal was going to take when they heard a loud thump from upstairs. Cal, being the male protector, wanted to go upstairs to see, if anyone had broken into the house or if anything, if someone was there. So when Cal got to Deirdre's room, where he was sure the noise came from, he found Annabelle on the floor. And as he was standing there trying to figure out how the doll fell on the floor, he felt the presence of someone dark and unwelcoming. Now, when I read this part, that's when I started feeling like somebody was watching me in my house. In fact, my dog Bella barked randomly at like the most random spot in the house. But it was only like 2 barks, and then that was it. And I thought maybe because she heard someone outside, I had the windows open. So, but I mean, it made me jump.
Just the timing of it.
Yeah, the timing couldn't have been more perfect, I guess you could say. So Cal turned around to see what was behind him, and there was nothing there. But something, now this is creepy, something caused him to scream a blood-curdling scream. So at this point now, like I said, they're talking to Ed and Lorraine about everything that happened. Laura kind of just takes over the story, explaining that Cal can't even finish what had happened. So she's explaining that Cal had yelled suddenly and was grabbing his chest, and blood was beginning to form on his shirt. Laura was able to get him to calm down and go downstairs and take a look at his chest. What she saw were cuts along Cal's chest. So 7 to be exact, 3 going vertical, 4 going horizontal. Ed even asks if he can see the cuts, but Cal lets him know that they had already gone away the day after, and by the 3rd day they were practically gone. Which is, by the way, that happens a lot. If you're doing an investigation that has to do with something that is inhuman or demonic, you'll see pictures of it all over the internet. People get cuts randomly. There's one picture of a guy who got a 6 as a cut on the back of his neck. There are people who get 3 cuts. Some people get 4 or 5 or 7 cuts. The 3 cuts that you receive are, again, a mockery of the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So that, to me, does not surprise me that he would get that, but it does surprise me that these cuts were vertical and horizontal. That's the part that got me. Here's where Ed and Lorraine start to do what they do best. Once Cal, Laura, and Deirdre were done explaining everything they possibly could about the doll, Ed started to give all 3 of them the hard truth of what was really going on. And what he told them was probably the last thing they wanted to hear. So Ed explains that inadvertently brought a spirit into the apartment. So Ed was going to have to call Father Everett to perform a blessing or even an exorcism, over the house and the doll. Now, like you had said beforehand in your research, that in the movie portion of the Conjuring film, Ed was performing, the exorcism. Right. He had to do it. But like you said, he's not one to actually perform an exorcism. So therefore, in this actual case, he had to call Father Everett to perform it. Now, most importantly, he told them, there is no Annabelle. What you've been told was a lie. They were duped into thinking that the doll was a spirit of a little girl attached. So it turns out it was the work of an intelligent spirit. And Ed explains that all three of them, that ghosts and human spirits cannot bring phenomena of this nature and intensity. Mm-hmm. They were dealing with something inhuman. And I know I've said inhuman a lot because that is like the number one title that Ed is giving this thing, is that it is inhuman. And lastly, Ed Warren gives a rundown of the honest mistakes that they made, which were, one, giving the doll recognition, which brought fear and even injury into the home. Mm-hmm. By acknowledging that doll, it was already starting to gain power in the house. Calling a medium was their second mistake. Mm-hmm. This is because the medium is used as an instrument of communication. So it allowed the inhuman spirit to give false information away to these people, or to the three. And the worst of it all was when they gave permission to the inhuman spirit to move into the doll. And that's the last thing you'd want to do. With all that had happened, Ed and Lorraine were able to get a blessing done on the house and holy water on the doll. Then Ed and Lorraine Warren took Annabelle back to their home and placed her in the Museum of Haunted Objects located in their home in Connecticut. Now, here is something that is crazy. While they were driving home with the doll in the car, in the back seat, as if sitting like a child, the car began to act funny. The car would stall. It would turn off automatically. The brakes wouldn't work. And then all of a sudden they would work. The car was violently, almost like the steering wheel was pulled. And it was like Ed was driving and the steering wheel got pulled as if Annabelle was trying to crash them, kill them. Now, they did manage to make it all the way home and put Annabelle in the museum, but they didn't just put Annabelle right in the case. So online, you'll see a picture of the actual Annabelle. She's inside this case that says, do not open for any reason. But before they even put her in a case, they actually had Annabelle on a chair tied up.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, she was actually tied up in a chair for quite some time, but she was managing to get out still. So in an incident where a police officer had come over to talk to Ed about a certain case that Ed was helping with, they were both inside the actual occult little museum of paranormal objects, and Ed had gone off to go do something, and he told the officer, listen, you can be in here, it's fine, just don't touch anything because all these objects are cursed, all these objects have something attached to it, and the last thing I want is for something to happen to you. Ed walks off into another room. The officer stays in that room, and he's looking around, and then we go to Ed, and Ed turns around and sees the officer coming out, pale as a ghost, and all he could hear was the officer mumbling, it's real, the doll is real. And all Ed could do was just kind of smirk at the fact that I told you so. Crazy. Also, another thing that happened was Lorraine was home alone, and she could hear growling in the home. That's creepy.
Yeah, I also read that, or heard in an interview that she says she will never look at that doll again.
Yes.
She will not stare into the eyes.
She never wants to see that doll. Yeah, she doesn't like to look at that doll ever. Yeah, that's pretty much, that's what all I had for the Annabelle story. And I will say this, there's a lot more to it. Listener, I highly encourage you to go check out a book called The Demonologist, The Extraordinary Career of Ed and Lorraine Warren. It has full detail of the whole Annabelle story, what happened, the Amityville story, along with the Conjuring stories, just the insight, the information. And I will say this, if you're going to read this book, you better leave a light on because there is some creepiness in this book.
Yeah, by the way, you can visit the Occult Museum in Connecticut, but you do need to make an appointment.
Yes, yeah, you have to make an appointment, but you can visit the museum. They do give tours there. the eeriness of researching this story was that I just kept feeling like somebody was behind me. I had music playing on my Amazon Music. I remember there was a certain song playing in the background. I won't say it just due to copyrights. And I remember I'm reading the portion about Annabelle and the blood and the three dots. And all of a sudden my music just starts going like just warping in a very odd, which has never happened before. And I play music off that thing almost every single day.
Yeah.
So for that to happen and then my dog barking at something that wasn't there creeped me out so much to the point where I had to call somebody just to, calm myself down until my wife got home from work.
Oh, man.
I mean, it was insane. So now I know there is a lot more about that we didn't cover, and that was due to time. But if you'd like to know more about the Warrens, please go to their, like I said, read the book. You can also go to warren.net. They have a lot of information. Also, listener, there is a foundation that I learned about. It's the Ed and Lorraine Foundation. And that basically, it is run by a certain someone who I'm about to mention here soon, because he's actually going to be a special guest on the show. And and so it's run by this person. And basically what it is, it's just to help to keep the foundation and the museum, up and running. So listener, if you get a chance, check out the website. And like I said, read the book. So I want to real quickly here go over something, and that is the Amityville case, which is a very interesting case. Again, a lot of that stuff that happened there is so unexplainable.
That's the thing, yeah. So many like anomalies that happen to the point where you can't really explain them by like general either coincidence or even science. For that
Right,
matter.
exactly. So one thing I learned about the Amityville house is the location of where the house is built.
Yeah.
So it turns out that the house itself is built on a property that was owned by a man who basically performed messed up autopsies on Native Americans.
Yes.
It was basically, to my understanding, he was basically just trying to figure out how they function. And then also when the house was built and he passed away, he left instructions to be buried on the property. So to me, that kind of makes me go, all right, we have someone that is doing a lot of evil-like things to humans and then gets buried on the property, so that way he can continue his evil-like ways, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so the foundation already is kind of quote-unquote tainted in a way.
Okay.
That would explain actually a lot, especially even before the
DeFeos,
the DeFeos family were even there, too. So that means basically the house has always been kind of like always drawn to a negative energy.
Yeah.
And it just took either the right person or right family to just bring it out.
Also, the negativity that started becoming even more in the house, from George Lutz being irritated all the time to the kids starting to argue and bring up issues that just randomly didn't make sense to the mom.
Yeah.
That negative presence definitely started to build. Started to build in that house. Now, granted, there was already negativeness in that house as it is, but to add more to it just made basically the cup overflow. With that, it's just, it explains more and more about the paranormal. The cases with the home in the UK and the home here in the States definitely has a very interesting tale and similarities in those cases, especially with the lifting of the chair and objects being thrown. Now, the thing that I caught the most from both of your research is the smells that people would get, those phantom smells. Now, to my understanding, when you get a smell like that, whether it's like a sulfur type smell or a decaying body type smell, you're supposed to already indicate that is an inhuman or evil spirit in the home.
Yeah.
I guess you could say regular spirits don't really give off that type of smell, that type of decomposing type smell. And the phantom smells that you usually get, like the Queen Mary, you get like a cigar smell. That's because that's what the captain would smoke all the time. So to me, that's definitely a demonic-like presence in that home for sure. And if you ever smell something like that in your own home, you better just call somebody.
I was in my research. I realized or found out that if you see a spirit, you should not approach it. Let it approach you.
Yes. I was told that you were to never ever approach the spirit. I guess what is it like? They'll disappear or dissipate because spirits, they can hear. They can hear you, and they know when you're there. In fact, there is a study that says, supposedly, we don't know if this is true or not, and we will never find out until we go upstairs, but supposedly spirits have actually better hearing than when they were alive. Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly what it is that causes it, but to my understanding, they have better. It's almost like a cat. Like a cat can hear so well that if you were to just make a simple noise and they look up automatically with like the deer in headlights. So it's kind of similar to cats, which is, I think, really kind of
I was kind of thinking cats too, just because you don't want to, when you have to let the cat approach you. You can't go and try to pet the cat; they run away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, well, listen. Before we close out this episode, gentlemen, I have a question for you, and I know I had asked Gabriel this question already. So let me just ask Rene. Actually, what was the creepiest part about doing this research for you when it came to the Amityville case?
One of the things that kind of like made me kind of like very eerie, it was that the dad would basically wake up at 3:15, the same time that the family died before.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, because that's just like a weird, very unexplainable coincidence. That's the thing. You can't explain that away at all.
Yeah. And I will say, chiming on the 3:15, residual energy of a death in a home usually resides for a long time. Like how people get that sinking feeling when they walk into a room where somebody has passed away, waking up at 3:15, which 3 o'clock is considered to be the witching hour.
Yeah.
And so, it's the witching hour, the devil's hour. Not a surprise that 3:15 would occur each time in that house.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So yeah, that's definitely creepy. Definitely creepy and all that. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Part 1. I would like to thank Rene Bravo and Gabriel Samaniego for joining me. Be sure to follow the show on all our social media pages. We've got Facebook at Pod Paranormal 87, Instagram at Void Podcast 18, Twitter at Nightwing Silver, and we have a website, intothevoidpod.com. That's intothevoidpod.com. You can check out all our in-studio photos. You can follow us and listen to the show on the website there. And now, my big announcement, because I'm very, very, very happy to be telling you and everybody that's listening to this episode, be sure to tune into the next episode as we continue with Part 2 of our discussion on Ed and Lorraine Warren with our special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to announce that the grandson of Ed and Lorraine Warren will be talking to us in studio here. His name is Chris McKinnell. He is the grandson of Lorraine Warren, and he will be talking to us about the doll Annabelle, about the cases that he had been a part of, and also a little bit about the museum and the foundation that he's also running. So that's going to be really interesting. That's right. The grandson of Ed and Lorraine Warren, Chris McKinnell, will be on this show.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I am so stoked about this. I've been trying to keep my mouth shut like this whole time. So I'm so happy to announce that. Any last thoughts, Rene?
No, just be careful of, when you're going up against spirits or anything that has like any sort of like history of hauntings and stuff like that. Just be very wary. Don't go in thinking that you know everything or
absolutely
very cocky.
I always tell people, when you're doing an investigation and you know everything, go in like you don't know a damn thing. Because that will just open up your world even more.
The more you know, the less you understand.
Exactly. Thank you, Gabriel. All right. Well, Gabriel, any final thoughts before we officially end this?
Just remember, my belief is the more you know about the topics that you're researching, about all this paranormal, I believe the more you're susceptible to experiencing them yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you become more of a magnet because you're now more aware of your surroundings.
Absolutely. Yes. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here. I'm G-Man, and I want to thank you so much for falling with me into the void. We'll catch you next time.
podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.